Support for Florida State Attorney Aramis Ayala is growing. More than 300 people traveled to Florida's state capitol on Thursday to protest Governor Rick Scott's removal of Ayala, the state's first elected black prosecutor, from a case because of her stance not to enforce the death penalty. Florida State Senator Randolph Bracy had this to say.
Whether you agree or not with the state attorney Ayala's decision, she was independently elected by the Ninth Circuit, and she has the right to make that decision.
Other Florida legislators say that Ayala should have sought the death penalty in the case of Markeith Lloyd. Lloyd is on trial for the murder of his pregnant ex-girlfriend Sade Dixon and Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Color of Change, an online racial justice organization, coordinated the protest last week. The group sponsored buses from Orlando, Jacksonville, and Tampa. Joining me now is the Color of Change Executive Director, Rashad Robinson. Still on with me, of course, is our panel, Lauren Victoria Burke, A. Scott Bolden, and Eugene Craig. Rashad, we keep saying we want black prosecutors in place because they will then have the discretion to make the decision whether to prosecute a case or not, what to proceed in the case based on the facts. Now we're in this position where we've got the prosecutor and we still see them not getting the discretion they're supposed to have.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why it's so important to stand up for Aramis Ayala. This is why it's important the folks who traveled, the over 100,000 people that have signed our petition. Our organization this past election cycle, we got tired of showing up in communities over and over again. And you know, people say, show up for elections, put your money where your mouth is. Just don't protest, but translate it to elections. And our members and community, they did over 1.8 million voter contacts for district attorney races. Orlando was one, Houston, Chicago, all around the country, mobilizing young black folks, mobilizing the larger community to turn out and elect reform-minded prosecutors. And Aramis Ayala goes into office, does one of the things the community wants, stands up, listens to the community, and now the governor and the state legislator are stepping in. They're also just introduced a bill in the House and moved it through to cut $1.3 million from her budget. One of the things she ran on was a program around domestic violence in her office, and cutting $1.3 million from her budget would prevent that type of program from going into place. We actually have to stand up in this situation because this is about taking away black political power. Black folks standing up, electing the first black state's attorney in Florida's history. And now the powers that be do not want her to be able to do her job.
So basically what they're doing is trying to circumvent or get around the vote. The people have spoken, and what they spoke and said was not, we want to make all of the decisions of the prosecutor. They gave her that job. Have you had a chance to speak to her? How is she dealing with everything that's happening now?
She is standing up in brilliant ways. She appreciates the energy and the passion from the people on the ground, but she's doing her job. She's showing up every day to do her job at promoting safety and justice in the community. And for all of us, for people who are watching, they can go to colorofchange.org and sign the petition. They can join this effort. We're going to have to continue to keep the pressure up and the heat up. Governor Rick Scott sat silent. Sat on the sidelines when Angela Corey decided to over-prosecute Marissa Alexander or throw the case of George Zimmerman's case. He sat silent where the DA in Miami has ran up the numbers on black and brown people going behind bars. And now a black woman attorney makes one decision and he steps in and tries to rip away her ability to not just do that decision, but any other decisions in the future. This is about our ability to be heard, counted, and visible, and we're going to stand up for Aramis Ayala, and that's part of the democratic process. We elect people, they do the right thing, and we've got to have their back.
Right, and then we've got to give them the power to actually do the job. Scott, talk to us just about why it's important to have black prosecutors in this role.
Well, I'm a former black prosecutor, if you will, and we bring a certain sensitivity, our life experiences, our prejudice and non-prejudice. And so it's really important because 80% of the people in the criminal justice system, mostly at the state level, are African American or brown folks, our Puerto Rican and Dominican brothers and sisters. That being said, I got to tell you, with Amaris, it's a tough issue. I don't know what the governor would say if he were sitting here, but the bottom line is her statement about not upholding the law, the fact that you can bring a death penalty, not just in this case, but any other case. She made a blanket statement saying that she was philosophically against it, would not bring it, and that, unfortunately, just from a purely legal perspective, allowed him and the legislature to remove her from those types of cases.
Actually, it doesn't. That's actually not true, and it's still unclear whether or not he actually can and whether or not he has the authority, and that's why he's made those initial statements and he's went radio silent for basically the last several weeks because he is being challenged and he's on legal shaky ground. But the larger point is 75% of prosecutors run unopposed in this country. Over 90% are white, less than 1% are black women, and the thing about prosecutors that we always say is they have wide discretion. This has been the thing that has happened time and time again where prosecutors have put the case to a grand jury when black people have been harmed or hurt, have decided not to prosecute someone when we've seen the viral video take over our feeds. And now we have a prosecutor, a black woman, using her same wide discretion, and all of a sudden wide discretion doesn't exist. It's the same thing with Stand Your Ground and Marissa Alexander in Florida. Stand Your Ground applied to George Zimmerman, but it did not apply to that black woman who was defending herself from domestic violence.
And it didn't apply to Trayvon Martin.
And it did not.
So Trayvon Martin couldn't stand his ground. But I'm sure that Ms. Ayala is not the first prosecutor to make a wide-ranging statement in the state of Florida.
Yes.
I mean, the idea that somehow, as Rashad correctly said, this is about black political power. This is about black political power in the South.
Prosecutors take an oath to uphold the law.
Of course.
When death penalty, I agree with Scott on this, is the law of the land. And I'm not a death penalty enthusiast.
Right.
I'm not in favor of it all. But that's why I couldn't be a prosecutor, because I would be looking to exercise discretion.
There's always been a double standard when black people in power have taken these types of stands. All of a sudden you get the white power structure that decides that they're going to now assert their authority. That generally never happens, but it happens in this case. And can you name another case that it has happened?
Name one other case where the governor stepped in.
A statement like that and been checked.
I can't name one, but I guarantee you, in this particular instance, there are lots of instances like this. If the law allows the governor, even if it is shaky ground, allows the governor to come in and do this. All I'm saying is she opened the door for this. I'm not no defender of the governor, if you will, and the optics on this are just awful. And I think you should continue protesting, but this is ultimately going to be decided by one of the judicial branches or a lawsuit or what have you. So you can keep fighting, but I'm saying a blanket statement about not enforcing the death penalty, and she took an oath of office to uphold the law, is going to be a pretty powerful argument.
She did not say that she's not going to prosecute.
She said
she did not say that she's
not going to ask for the death penalty, and that is the law, and she took an oath to uphold the law.
The law is that there is a death penalty, not that you have to ask for it.
But there would have to be, I understand what Scott's saying, there would have to be some set of circumstances under which she would be willing to do it. She probably couldn't come out and say she wouldn't do it at any time. Listen, we're out of time, unfortunately, on this subject. We're rooting for you. We're just hashing it all out here. Thank you, Rashad Robinson.
Great to be with you.
We appreciate you. Coming up next on NewsOne Now, almost every state forbids 16 and 17-year-olds from being charged for adults as misdemeanors, being charged as adults for misdemeanors and nonviolent crimes. North Carolina is about to get on board, leaving New York State holding the dubious honor. We'll explain. And Be the Match Registry is looking for black bone marrow donors to help aid those suffering from blood diseases like sickle cell anemia. I'll chat with two Be the Match advocates about steps you can take to become a donor and save lives. Stay tuned.